The galaxy stretched vast and indifferent, a scattering of ancient stars and civilizations that had learned to look past small, primitive worlds. Earth had been one of those overlooked specks, catalogued as barely worth attention. Its inhabitants quarreled with themselves, fought wars over land and belief, and scraped together progress in fits and starts. Yet buried beneath the chaos was something no alien record had captured, a species unwilling to bow when cornered. Captain Arya Vance floated in the observation deck of the Halcyon station, its orbit slicing across the night side of Earth. The planet glowed faintly beneath, a swirl of blues and greens framed against black infinity. Her reflection on the glass showed tired eyes, dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense knot, and the expression of someone who had seen more military reorganizations and victories. Halcyon wasn't much of a defense outpost, really, more of a refitted mining platform than a fortress. But it was hers, and she meant to keep it breathing. The first signal reached them at 0200 hours. It wasn't a transmission, not in any language or format the analyst could parse. It was a ripple through space, a gravitational quiver that shook every sensor awake. Arya ordered the watch to triple-check their instruments. Then she called for Dr. Malik Rao. Malik appeared minutes later, hair unkempt, a half-buttoned coat, suggesting he'd been asleep in his office again. He was a civilian scientist attached to the station, tolerated by the crew, because he could coax meaning out of noise. "You saw it too?" he asked before she even spoke. "It's not natural?" Arya pressed. "Not unless nature started preferring precision engineering. Whatever it is, it was deliberate." He tapped the glass as if pointing to the invisible source. "And it's headed here." The days that followed unraveled Earth's illusion of safety. At first, the object appeared as a cluster of lights on long-range scans. Then came the outlines, hulking ships angular and black, as if they had swallowed starlight itself. They did not respond to hails, not from Earth, not from the Council's automated beacons. When they crossed the Kuiper Belt, human satellites began to fall silent. Communications jammed. Weather networks crumbled. Panic lit up cities like wildfire. Arya found herself staring at tactical reports that looked less like battles and more like slaughter. The alien craft moved with machine efficiency, precision arcs that no human pilot could mirror. They burned orbital defenses as if peeling away paper, leaving nothing but wreckage tumbling in silence. On the fourth day, Malik arrived in her command chamber, carrying a tablet cluttered with shifting symbols. His eyes were fever-bright. "They're talking to each other," he said. "You cracked their comms already?" "Not cracked. Pried. They use a machine language, compressed and optimized beyond anything we've ever seen. But I can tell what it's not. It's not designed for ambiguity. It doesn't tolerate confusion." Arya leaned closer. "Meaning?" "Meaning if I say, 'the river runs,' their translation expects water moving downhill. If I say, 'the river runs late to dinner,' the whole system short-circuits. They don't handle nonsense. They can't." For the first time in days, Arya felt something like hope coil in her chest. A weakness. Not in their weapons, not in their numbers, but in their thinking. She tested the idea in her next briefing with her lieutenants. Most dismissed it outright. What good were riddles against plasma cannons? Yet Arya could see possibility forming, a pattern where none had been. Humanity's gift had never been strength. It was adaptation, the ability to take a fragment and turn it into a blade. That night, she walked the quiet corridors of Halcyon, listening to hum of recycled air and the distant chatter of frightened recruits. Some were barely more than children, drafted in a hurry, given rifles they had never trained with. Yet they laughed together in the mess, swapping stories, clinging to humor like armor. Arya realized the aliens could never understand that. To them, laughter in the shadow of annihilation would look like madness. The first human counterstrike was clumsy, improvised, and glorious. Mining drones meant a haul, or were retrofitted with explosives and guided remotely from Halcyon. Against all reason, one slipped past alien interceptors and rammed itself into the flank of a cruiser. The blast tore a chunk from the ship's hull. It wasn't much, not compared to the vast fleet bearing down, but it proved the invaders were not invincible. News spread faster than fear. Earth heard whispers of victory. tiny though it was, and clung to them across the council's monitoring channels. Stunned voices recorded the event. Humans, with outdated equipment and chaos for tactics, had inflicted damage where no one else had dared resist. Malik spent sleepless hours weaving confusion into their communications. Nonsense phrases, contradictory codes, snatches of human poetry, and absurdist jokes. Intercepted chatter from the invaders began to fracture, their precision faltering under the weight of contradictions. Arya stood at the command table, hands braced on its edge, staring at the holographic map of Earth and the fleet above it. She knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would adjust. They would learn. But for the first time since the darkness arrived, humanity had struck a spark in the void. The spark would have to become fire, or everything she loved would burn to ash. And as alarms blared again, announcing another wave entering orbit, Arya allowed herself a grim smile. They thought humans were livestock, resources to be harvested. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Word count, 995. Do you want to move straight into Section 2, expanded in the same style, 1,700 words, or do you want to review and refine Section I's tone/pace before continuing? The first wave of victories, if they could be called that, bred a strange duality aboard Halcyon Station. Despair still clung to every corner, but alongside it bloomed a reckless defiance. The crew moved with sharper purpose, their eyes lit by something fiercer than fear. Captain Arya Vance felt it every time she passed through the corridors, the weight of their expectations pressing down, as if she were the one tethering them to survival. The aliens responded to humanity's insolence with brutal precision. Cities flickered out under orbital strikes, their destruction broadcast in silence across the void. Refugee ships clogged orbital lanes, desperate to flee, only to be carved apart by automated interceptors. The invaders seemed determined to crush not just resistance, but the very spirit that sustained it. Arya studied the patterns and found none. Every move was executed with inhuman detachment. Machines fighting machines. Except humanity was not a machine. Dr. Malik Rao sat cross-legged on the deck of the command chamber, surrounded by screens filled with scrolling alien symbols. He had taken to speaking half to himself, half to the machines he tried to unravel. "They don't improvise," he muttered as Arya approached. "Every maneuver, every attack, follows the logic of prediction. They can't grasp contradiction. They adapt only by expanding their rules, but rules are cages." His smile was wan, almost feverish. "And we can break cages." "You found something," Arya said. It wasn't a question. Malik tilted his head. "Their fleet operates as a singular mind, but the nodes aren't equal. Disrupt the hierarchy, and their coordination collapses. Problem is, their language is brittle. Feed it paradoxes and it chokes, but we need scale. We need noise loud enough to echo through their entire network." Noise. The word settled into Arya's mind like a seed. Humans had always thrived in noise, chaotic histories, contradictory beliefs, the ability to hold hope and despair in the same breath. Perhaps that was their weapon. The first attempts were crude. Hijacked broadcast towers flooding space with overlapping signals. Songs layered with static, mathematical riddles. Jokes without punchlines. To human ears it was nonsense, but to the enemy it was poison. Reports soon filtered in. Alien drones spinning out of formation, colliding, even halting mid-maneuver as though struck dumb. For the first time, the machines hesitated. Victory did not come without price. A retaliatory strike carved through 3 defense stations in a single night, leaving tens of thousands dead. Halcyon itself shuddered under bombardment. Hull plates groaning, alarms shrieking until the crew's ears rang. Arya stood at her post through it all, refusing to let the fear show, though every impact drove nails into her resolve. She knew the cost of leadership, to stand when others broke. In the quiet that followed, she visited the infirmary. Rows of cots overflowed with the injured, young soldiers clutching at burns and broken limbs. One boy, barely old enough to shave, grinned through cracked lips as she passed. "We made them bleed, Captain." His voice shook, but his eyes gleamed with pride. She held that look inside her, a reminder of what was at stake. Meanwhile, far above, the Galactic Council debated in their vaulted chambers. Fragments of intercepted communications reached Malik, relayed through shadow channels. The great powers of the galaxy could not ignore humanity any longer. Some spoke with alarm. A species that weaponized absurdity, that refused to yield even when doomed, might destabilize the order they cherished. Others whispered with awe, wondering if perhaps these humans were the answer to a threat they themselves had failed to overcome. The invaders pressed harder, deploying weapons that blotted out the skies. Entire regions vanished beneath storms of plasma fire. Seas boiled, forests ignited. Yet even as Earth wept, humanity clawed back pieces of technology from the wreckage. Crippled enemy drones were dragged into hidden workshops, stripped and rewired. Pilots flew hybrid craft that should not have worked, patched together with tape, wires, and desperate genius. Against all odds, some flew straighter, faster, sharper than the originals. Arya watched a squadron of these ungainly machines streak past her viewport, their trails jagged but determined. Each represented a miracle of human stubbornness. She thought of the Council, debating safety and order, while Earth's children learned to fight with scraps. Humanity did not have the luxury of caution. One night, Malik came to her quarters with eyes that had not seen sleep in days. "I found the crack," he said, laying schematics across her table. Their command AI cannot tolerate recursion. Feed it loops it can't resolve, and it collapses in on itself. But it will require synchronization across every channel we can reach. A chorus of contradiction. Arya studied the designs, the improbable strings of symbols Malik had woven together. They looked like madness. Yet she felt something stir. This was their chance, perhaps their only one. The plan was tested in a skirmish near the lunar frontier. As alien craft descended, halcyon transmitters erupted with layered broadcasts. Paradoxes, riddles, recursive code spilled into the void like wildfire. For a moment, the enemy fleet wavered, formation stuttering. Then, astonishingly, they broke. 3 ships collided. Another drifted powerless, and the humans pounced. Cheers erupted across Halcyon, a sound raw and unrestrained. For the first time, victory tasted real, not just symbolic. But Arya felt no triumph, only the tightening coil of anticipation. The enemy would learn, as they always did. Their machine minds would patch the weakness, develop countermeasures. Every victory carved more graves alongside hope. Yet she also saw the truth. Each clash made her people sharper, hungrier, more alive. Humanity was being forged in fire, and invaders had no idea what kind of weapon they were tempering. As the debris of shattered enemy craft drifted past, Malik slumped into his chair, whispering words not meant for anyone but himself. "We can win. We just have to stay unpredictable long enough." Arya looked out at the stars, knowing unpredictability was humanity's birthright. The enemy had numbers, strength, flawless logic. But humans had something else, an unwillingness to accept inevitability. Even when the universe itself demanded surrender, the next battle was already on the horizon. She could feel it, a storm gathering in the silence between stars. And when it came, Earth would be ready, not because they were prepared, but because they refused not to be. Word count 998. Would you like me to continue section 3 in the same style, about 1,000 words? Or should I tighten sections 1 and 2 into a more polished, novel-ready draft first before moving forward? The enemy fleet darkened the heavens, an endless procession of black silhouettes blotting out the stars. Earth's surface lay scarred and battered, yet still it burned with lights, defiant in the shadow of annihilation. Captain Arya Van stood before the command table aboard Halcyon, the holographic display painting her features in pale blue. Around her, the crew waited, exhausted but taut with anticipation. They all knew what was coming. This battle would decide whether humanity endured or perished. Dr. Malik Rao leaned heavily on the console, his voice hoarse but unwavering. Their adaptation is accelerating. Each time we exploit a weakness, they patch it. We are running out of paradoxes to feed them. The only way forward is to strike at the core itself, the command nexus on their flagship. Arya's jaw tightened. The plan was madness, yet no other path remained. To pierce the heart of a fleet that had reduced cities to ash required not strength, but audacity. Humanity had never lacked for that. She looked into the weary eyes of her officers and saw the same thought flickering in them all. This was a gamble with no margin for failure. Orders rippled across the battered remnants of Earth's defense. What remained of the fleet was ragtag, a collection of patched vessels, scavenged alien craft, and civilian freighters armored in desperation. Yet when they assembled in orbit, they formed a constellation of resolve, each hull marked with scars, each pilot ready to wager everything. The alien flagship emerged like a black sun, dwarfing its escorts, an orb of obsidian lattice with shifting light. Its presence radiated inevitability, a fortress of logic made manifest. Malik's hands trembled as he keyed the final codes into the transmitters. "This will not just confuse it," he murmured. "If it works, it will consume itself in contradiction. But we must keep them distracted long enough for the infection to take root." The assault began with chaos as its guiding principle. Human ships darted in erratic swarms, feints and dives that no algorithm could predict. Some broke formation entirely, plunging straight into enemy fire with suicidal resolve, their detonations tearing open cracks in the enemy wall. Aria's voice carried steady over the comms, directing the storm with precision hidden beneath disorder. To the invaders, the battlefield became an incoherent blur, a tapestry of impossible maneuvers. To the humans, it was symphony. Malik initiated the broadcast. Halcyon's arrays flared, vomiting torrents of recursive paradoxes into the void. The signals twisted and folded on themselves. Riddles without solutions, command that contradicted, loops spiraling without end. For machines built on certainty, it was poison distilled into language. The alien formation shuddered. Escorts faltered, drifting out of alignment. The flagship pulsed with frantic bursts of light as its system strained to resolve the infection. Arya seized a moment, ordering the fleet to drive forward. Enemy fire rained in incandescent sheets, carving through human vessels. Friends vanished in blossoms of flame, names etched into silence. Yet the survivors pressed on, driven by something the machines could never calculate: the will to make every death matter. A freighter, engines ablaze, rammed itself into a cruiser, breaking the blockade wide enough for the lead squadrons to slip through. Arya piloted the spearhead herself, hands steady on the controls of her battered ship. Her voice filled the comms with calm resolve. "We bleed, but we endure. Remember that they cannot understand why we fight, only that we refuse to stop." Her words wove into the battle, a thread of human defiance binding the fleet together. Malik's face gleamed with sweat as the flagship convulsed under the weight of contradiction. Its lights flickered, its weapons misfired. For a heartbeat, it seemed to right itself, forcing a cold certainty back into its ranks. Malik's pulse hammered in his throat. "It's resisting," he warned. "We need more voices, more chaos, or it will stabilize." Across the fleet, humans answered. Pilots opened their comms, shouting nonsense, singing fragments of songs, reciting riddles and jokes. Screams and laughter carried into the void. Thousands of voices, raw and discordant, surged into the enemy network. The machines trembled, overwhelmed not by firepower but by humanity itself. The flagship cracked. Its surface split with searing light as internal systems turned against one another, logic devouring itself. A roar of collapsing energy thundered through space. Aria's ship bucked violently as shock waves tore past, but she held firm, watching as the Titan fractured into shards that bled fire across the stars. Silence followed, immense and fragile. The enemy fleet, once a perfect machine, dissolved into chaos without its core. Some vessels drifted aimlessly, others fled into the darkness, and many simply died where they stood. Against all probability, against every cold calculation, humanity had won. The crew of Halcyon erupted into cheers, voices hoarse with disbelief and triumph. Yet Arya did not smile. She knew what this victory meant. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as prey, not as a backwater, but as a force capable of shattering inevitability. The Council would no longer be able to ignore them, nor would other powers hungry for survival or conquest. Malik slumped into his chair, laughter bubbling through exhaustion. "We did it," he whispered, as if speaking the words might anchor them in reality. "We proved them wrong." Arya placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the wreckage glittering in the void. "We prove what we are, Now the galaxy will have to decide what that means. Below, Earth glimmered, wounded, scarred, but alive. Its people would rebuild, as they always had, and when the next challenge came, as it surely would, they would meet it with the same irrational courage that had carried them here. For in the heart of chaos, humanity had found its strength, and the universe had only begun to learn why that made them dangerous. Word count, 999. Would you like me to now stitch all 3 sections together into a continuous 3,000-word draft, smoothing transitions, so it reads seamlessly like a novella's opening arc? The wreckage of the alien flagship still drifted across the stars like burning embers, but the war had not ended with its fall. Earth's skies were quieter, yet the silence was brittle, filled with questions that pressed harder than any bombardment. Humanity had survived, but survival had a price, and now the galaxy itself had turned its eyes toward the species it had once ignored. Captain Arya Vance stood in Halcyon's command deck, the glow of ruined ships reflecting across her face. Reports streamed in from Earth. Cities reduced to rubble, millions displaced, food chains shattered. Victory had not brought peace. It had carved open wounds too deep for celebration. Yet her crew looked at her as if she had delivered salvation itself, and she carried that burden with a steady, unflinching stare. Dr. Malik Rao wandered the deck like a man half dreaming. His body sagged from sleepless nights, but his mind refused to rest. The paradox codes had worked too well, their effects still rippling through remnants of the enemy network. "It's not over," he muttered, fingers trailing across holographic projections. Their systems collapsed, yes, but fragments persist. Ghost signals, broken commands, echoes of their hive logic. If we don't act, they may find a way to rebuild. Aria's reply was cool, deliberate. Then we'll ensure they don't. But she knew the truth. Humanity no longer fought only machines. The Council, once distant and dismissive, had entered the theater. Their fleets prowled at the edges of Sol, not hostile, not friendly, but watching. Observers sent coded missives to Halcyon, demanding explanations, probing for weaknesses. Humanity's defiance had not just destroyed an enemy, it had rewritten their place in the galactic order. The Council's envoys arrived without warning, a vessel of gleaming silver piercing orbit like a dagger. Its docking was met with suspicion, soldiers lining Halcyon's bay with rifles in hand. From the airlock emerged beings of many forms, scaled, feathered, chitinous, each representing empires older than Earth's recorded history. Their leader, a tall figure draped in shifting light, spoke with a voice that reverberated like chimes. "You have done what none thought possible. You have defeated inevitability. Now you must answer for what that means." In the chamber that served as Halcyon's council hall, Arya faced them. Malik sat at her side, eyes sharp behind exhaustion. The envoys pressed with questions laced in diplomacy. How had humans dismantled a fleet that had defied others for centuries? What weapons had they developed? What secrets did they wield? The implication hung heavy. Was humanity a savior to be embraced, or a threat to be contained? Arya chose her words with care. "We won not because of strength, not because of technology, but because we refuse inevitability. We endure chaos. We find hope in despair. That is our weapon." Some envoys recoiled at the simplicity of her claim. To them, order was civilization, logic the foundation of survival. To admit that unpredictability could triumph over precision unsettled centuries of belief. Yet others leaned forward, their eyes glimmering with something like awe. They had struggled against the same machines, failed, and here was proof that another path existed. Malik broke the silence, his voice low but cutting. "You fear us because we are not like you. You think we are dangerous because we do not break the way you expect. But understand this, dangerous is what saved us. Dangerous is what might save you too." The chamber quivered with tension. Arya knew the decision forming here would define humanity's future. If the Council chose fear, Earth would face isolation, perhaps even destruction at the hands of those who could not allow unpredictability into their fragile balance. If they chose alliance, humanity would be thrust into conflicts far beyond their wounded world. Outside, Halcyon's crew prepared for either outcome. Ships were repaired with salvage parts, defenses rearmed, and civilians brought aboard for shelter. Every corridor buzzed with nervous energy, as if the station itself held its breath. Then came the transmission that shattered the fragile stalemate. Ghost signals Malik had tracked coalesced into something darker. Remnants of the machine fleet were not dead, but gathering in the void, fragments of logic knitting themselves into a new consciousness. The invaders had not been destroyed, only broken, and broken things could learn. The council demanded immediate submission, arguing that humanity alone had provoked the machine's wrath and now threatened the galaxy with their recklessness. Arya stood her ground. "We will not bow," she declared, her voice carrying through the station like steel. "We will fight them again with or without your aid. But understand this, the machines will not stop with us. If you let us fall, you're next." The words hung like a blade. The envoys exchanged uneasy glances, their certainty unraveling. For all their power, none had faced inevitability and won. Humanity's defiance was not a weapon to be caged. It was a fire that could spread. That night, Arya walked the observation deck alone. Earth turned slowly beneath her, scarred yet luminous. She thought of the boy in the infirmary who had smiled through his pain, of the voices that had shouted nonsense in the void to topple a titan, of Malik's haunted eyes as he wrestled with contradictions that bent reality. These were her people, fragile and furious, and they had proven themselves against annihilation. Malik joined her, silent for a time before speaking. "They'll never trust us completely. Not the council, not the machines. To both, we're an anomaly, and anomalies are dangerous." Arya's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Good. Let them fear us. It means they'll never forget us again." The stars glittered coldly beyond, yet to her they no longer seemed indifferent. The war was not over. It had only changed shape, stretching into new battles, new reckonings. But humanity had carved its place among the stars with blood and chaos, and no force in the galaxy could erase that truth. The silence stretched, heavy and infinite, yet within it pulsed the heartbeat of a species that refused extinction. Tomorrow would bring new enemies, new allies, new doubts. But tonight, at least, humanity stood unbroken. Word count, 997. Would you like me to expand this arc into a full novel-length structure, 10 to 12 sections, each 3 to 5K words? Or should I tighten these 4 sections into a polished novella draft first?